Imagine for just a second that you went out and bought the absolute most advanced, complex, and incredibly powerful piece of technology in the entire known universe, right? You bring it home, you unbox it, and there's literally no user manual, zero instructions. You're just kind of expected to figure out how to operate this thing entirely on the fly. Well, guess what? That is exactly what happens to every single one of us the moment we're born. Welcome to This Explainer, where today we're diving into the ultimate piece of hardware and software combined, the human mind. And we are going to build that missing user manual together, right here, right now. Let's get into it.
But first, I want to hook you immediately with a question that's fascinated people for well over a century. Are you using 100% of your brain's capacity? Really think about it. I mean, we've all heard the rumors, right? We've seen the sci-fi movies, and we've all kind of wondered what we could pull off if we could just somehow unlock these hidden, dormant reserves in our minds. Well, keep your answer tucked away for a minute, because we've got a major hardware myth-busting segment coming up that is absolutely going to change how you view your own potential.
Okay, let's dive into this table of contents for your new user manual. We'll start with decoding the human mind, then hit brain myths and neuroplasticity, move on to procrastination and psychological mindedness, explore thriving as highly perceptive, and finally wrap up with achieving peak performance flow. Starting off with Section 1, decoding the human mind. It's time to understand your operating system. So the word psychology actually comes from the Greek words psyche, which means mind, and logos, meaning study. Basically, it's the scientific study of behavior and mental processes. But look, I want you to realize that psychology isn't just some dry, boring academic theory. No, it is the literal study of how your personal operating system processes information, executes behaviors, and leverages the 12 qualities of emotional intelligence in everyday real-world situations. Whether you're trying to learn a new habit, dealing with stress at work, or just practicing some self-mastery to figure out, why you snapped at a friend, you are actively experiencing the very mental processes this entire field seeks to understand. Moving on to Section 2, brain myths and neuroplasticity. Let's talk about upgrading your hardware.
Now, what's really interesting about this is the stark contrast between fiction and reality. That whole 10% myth, it actually originated from a total misinterpretation of an early 20th century psychologist named William James. And then it just got massively amplified by Hollywood movies. But the 100% reality is that modern neuroimaging techniques like fMRI and PET scans prove our brains are virtually fully active all the time. Literally all the time. Even when you're just resting on the couch or doing something super simple, multiple regions of your brain are lighting up and firing. There are no vast, dormant reserves waiting to be magically unlocked. You are already using your whole brain. So you might be wondering, if we're already using 100% of our brain, how do we actually get any better? How do we get that upgrade? Well, the answer is neuroplasticity. This is your brain's incredible, lifelong ability to fundamentally reorganize itself. When you learn new skills or drop yourself into a new environment, you are quite literally forming and strengthening brand new neural pathways. It's like paving new roads in your mind. You don't need to unlock some hidden 90% of your brain. You just need to continuously rewire the 100% you already use through practice and experience. And this is huge for you every single day, because every habit you build and every routine you tweak physically alters the actual structure of your brain. But to support all that rewiring, you really have to perform some routine hardware maintenance. And science actually backs up a few highly practical tips to foster this neuroplasticity and daily mind control. First, keep learning new skills. That literally forces those new neural connections to grow. Stay physically active, which gets the blood flowing up there. Protect your whole system by getting 7 to 9 hours of really good quality sleep. That's when your brain actually consolidates your memories and clears out the built-up toxins from the day. And finally, practice mindfulness to boost your cognitive flexibility. This right here, this is exactly how you take care of the physical machine.
Okay, Section 3, procrastination and psychological mindedness. Let's do a little troubleshooting on some system bugs. So why do we needlessly delay tasks? I mean, procrastination affects almost every single one of us, right? It's this chronic issue, especially if you're a student or a busy professional. But it is super important that we frame this correctly. Researchers are quick to point out that procrastination isn't just you being lazy. Not at all. It's actually the irrational delay of an intended course of action, right up to the point where it causes you subjective discomfort. We literally put things off even when we fully know it's going to hurt us later. So why does this system error even happen?
To really answer that, we're going to look at this fascinating piece of research from the International Journal of Indian Psychology.
This study took a close look at university students to explore the relationship between how much they avoid tasks and this really cool concept known as psychological mindedness, which in plain English essentially just means how well we actually understand the inner workings of our own minds. And this brilliantly illustrates that the solution lies in having high psychological mindedness. This means tapping into those core qualities of emotional intelligence, having really good access to your feelings, maintaining high self-awareness, being open to change, and actually understanding the why behind your own thoughts and behaviors. The researchers found that this directly links to low procrastination. Think of psychological mindedness like it's a built-in antivirus program. When a task feels awful or totally overwhelming, a psychologically minded person uses their emotional intelligence to process those negative feelings and cope with them, instead of just irrationally running away from the task. In fact, the study revealed a significant negative correlation of -0.37 between these two variables. To put that simply, it proves that as your psychological mindedness goes up, your tendency to procrastinate genuinely goes down. And what's incredibly empowering about this is that they found absolutely zero significant gender differences here. Anyone, literally anyone, regardless of who they are, can reduce procrastination and gain way better self-mastery just by becoming a bit more aware of their own internal emotional states.
All right, move into section 4, thriving as highly perceptive. Let's talk about calibrating those hypersensitive sensors. I absolutely love this quote from licensed therapist Mariana Jakuska. She says, highly perceptive people see life in high definition. Now, if this sounds like you, listen up. Your intense curiosity and that sensitivity to micro changes in people's expressions or tiny sounds or sudden emotional shifts in a room, that is not a defect. There's nothing wrong with you. You're simply operating with an HD sensor. However, taking in life in full HD naturally requires some pretty specialized processing power.
Because without the right coping skills or role models, taking in this massive amount of data can easily fracture the mind and cause a total system overload. You might develop this exhausting perfectionism as your brain frantically tries to organize every single tiny detail. You might experience sensory overload that actually bogs down and slows your mental processing. Maybe you feel like a chronic underachiever or just a misfit, simply because you don't conform to the norm. And most commonly, you might suffer from some really intense overreactivity to just everyday events simply because your sensitive circuits are constantly overwhelmed. So how do we apply a patch for this overload? Well, first and foremost, you have to know that you are not sick. Drop the guilt, drop the shame. The real key here is to separate your sensing from your acting. Look, just because you perceive a really intense emotion doesn't mean you have to immediately react to it. You need to insert a pause, often by using mindfulness to just slow down those fired up nerves so you can actually calculate your choices. And finally, you absolutely must communicate your specific needs to your environment. By doing this, highly perceptive people can take that brilliant, overwhelming HD world and integrate it into a truly meaningful life. And now for our final chapter, Section 5, Achieving Peak Performance Flow. It is time to unlock Pro Mode. So the crucial point here is understanding the psychological concept of flow. It's absolutely essential for mastering your daily output. Flow is defined as an intrinsically rewarding state of full absorption in a task. Basically, when you're deeply in the zone, a high degree of control just feels entirely effortless, and your whole perception of time completely distorts. Hours feel like minutes. This concept was actually pioneered by the psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. He originally studied these deeply immersed artists who would just get so lost in their painting that they completely forgot to eat or drink or even sleep. It's the complete melting together of action and consciousness. And learning to harness this, it completely changes how you work, how you study, and how you create. Let's move to how this builds, because how do we actually boot up this flow state on demand? Well, flow theory postulates 3 specific conditions. Step 1 is optimal challenge. This means the difficulty of the task has to perfectly match your high skill level. You can't be overwhelmed by something that's way too hard, but you also can't be bored by something that's way too easy. It has to be just right. Step 2 is high motivation. The activity needs to be intrinsically rewarding to you. You have to actually care about it. And step 3 is immediate feedback. You need a clear, ongoing sense of your progress as you go. When these 3 things align, boom, you enter flow. The very name flow actually comes from the participants in those pioneering 1975 interviews. When they were asked to describe what being in top form really felt like, they kept using these water metaphors. They said things like, it was like floating, I was carried on by the flow.
That profound sensation of being entirely in the zone, just effortlessly propelled forward by your own deeply focused attention, that is the absolute peak of human cognitive capability. Which brings us to the end of our user manual and leaves you with this final, incredibly vital question. What challenge will put your brain in the flow state today? You now know that you have 100% of your brain at your absolute disposal. You know exactly how to leverage neuroplasticity to physically grow. You understand how to combat that nasty procrastination bug with self-awareness and emotional intelligence, and how to harness high perception as an actual superpower. The machinery is yours to command, so go out there and use it. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I will catch you in the next one.